Yacht my relatives. Hello, this is Mark Charles, and today is Monday, December 19th, 2022, and I am finally sitting down with my second cup of coffee. I just returned back from New Mexico and the Navajo Nation, where I was last week visiting family and making some arrangement for some future trips. But yeah, it's good to be home. I got home over the weekend, and it's just great to be back in DC again. And I wanted to jump on today and have my second cup of coffee and talk about why this is an important day, not just for me, but for our country. But before I begin, I just want to do as I always do, which is acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from what's now called Washington, D.C., but these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the lands where I live. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. I see Terry is with me today. Yat A Terry, thanks for joining. I see Shantina is here. Yat A Shantina, thanks for joining. You'll notice I'm wearing my Not Today Colonizer shirt. I am wearing that. I don't wear this shirt out in public a whole lot because the shirt itself feels kind of aggressive. But there's a few times, a few days throughout the year where I need to just stop and remind myself, no, not today, colonizer. We cannot allow our nation to continue to do and hide some of the things that it does and the things it hides. And we have to expose these things, talk about them, and bring them to the forefront. And that brings me to today, December 19th of 2020. And for those of you who know or who have been following me for a while, you will know that it was 11 years ago, December 19th of 2012, that I hosted a public reading of House Resolution 3326, which is the 2010 Department of Defense Appropriations Act. It was passed on December 19th and signed by President Obama. And I hosted a public reading of this because I learned that this bill was passed in 2009, but I learned about it in 2011, and it was in 2012 I hosted the reading. But this bill contains an apology to Native peoples. And I want to talk about that bill today, but I want to just also tell you the story of kind of how I came to learn about this bill, and I just want to talk a little bit about some of these things. So, Diana, great. Good to see you today. Thanks for joining. So let me just give you a little bit of history behind how I learned about this bill and what happened. Back in 2009, I was living in Fort Defiance on the Navajo Nation. And I was following I was following politics more closely. Living on the reservation, I noticed that we never got campaigned to. And the Navajo Nation, which is about 26,000 square miles. If we were a state, we'd be the 40th largest state. Nearly 300,000 citizens of our nation, and over almost 200,000 living on our reservation. And yet, 2008, we never got campaigned to. No candidate ever came and spoke to us on our reservation about getting our vote for president. And so I was taking notice of this, and I was following politics a bit more closely. And I had, back in 2009, actually, in January of 2009, I had published an article, and it was calling for what I called the creation of a virtual Native American state. And what I was arguing was that what if every enrolled member of a Native nation that was federally recognized had the opportunity to vote collectively, not in the state or the county where they lived, or voting district where they live, but for a virtual Native American state. And there's about 6 million Native peoples in the United States, and it wouldn't require them, but it would give them the option to register to vote in this virtual Native American state. Those votes would be pooled, and we would be given our own representatives in the House and our own members of the Senate. and we could then vote and have advocates in the Congress for Native issues, and to talk most specifically, and even to give us a vote in the Electoral College, which then again would force presidential candidates to campaign to us. And so I had written this proposal back, I think it was in January of 2009, and had actually traveled around the country talking about this proposal. And visited many reservations in dozens of different states, talking with leaders and people about this idea and the need to somehow create better representation for Native peoples in the country. And that the idea was kind of catching on, and there was at least some talk about it, not a lot, but a little bit. And in 2011, on December 4th of 2011, I had published this article on my blog, and I'll put this in there. It was just called "Taking the 51st Virtual Native American State Conversation to Iowa, New Hampshire, and the Rest of the Country." And so as the 2012 election campaign season was starting, I decided that I was going to visit and follow the candidates through the primary states and the caucus states, beginning with Iowa and New Hampshire in January of 2012. And I was going to do my best to raise this issue with them throughout the campaigns and to get them to talk about them. And so I was making plans, right? This is December 12 or December 4 of 2011. And I had published this article kind of announcing or stating my intentions, and I was going to travel from the reservation. I'd already bought tickets to go to Iowa. I had bought tickets to go to New Hampshire, and I was going to be a part of or try to raise the issue of a virtual Native American state with our candidates at those spaces. And then on December 19, just by chance of 2011, I published this article. And I had, during the one of the debates, Mitt Romney stated in one of the primary debates that he would never apologize for America, the United States of America. You know, there was a lot of debate around President Barack Obama's stance regarding U.S. history, and he was seen as not upholding American exceptionalism. And so Mitt Romney, when asked in the debate, he said, "I would never apologize for the United States of America." And while I didn't agree with him, at least his comments had context. But then a few weeks later, after the debate was in November, later November, early December, he released an ad, a political ad. And in the ad, with no context, he just said, "As your president, I will never apologize for the United States of America." And since he removed the context, I decided to kind of confront him on it. And so I wrote this op-ed. I published it on my blog as well as on a few Native news websites, I believe, and posted it on December 19 of 2011. And the comments I'm going to reference weren't on my blog. They were on a different website, but I was kind of monitoring the different places it was published that day. And after I published it a few hours later, someone commented and said that the U.S. government had already apologized. And I thought they were referencing what was going on in Canada regarding residential schools. And I thought, well, they don't know the difference between the U.S. and Canada. So I just ignored their comment. And then someone else commented and said, well, you know, it's striking that Mark would ask for this apology on the second anniversary of the apology to Native peoples. And I saw that comment and I'm like, what are they talking about? And so I Googled U.S. government apology to Native peoples, December 19, 2009. And I came across an article. It was published by someone from Harvard, who the article was titled, "A Tree Fell in the Forest and No One Heard a Sound." A tree fell in the forest. The U.S. apologized to Native Americans and nobody heard a sound. And in that article, it referenced House Resolution 3326 and it talked about this apology that was buried in this resolution on December 19 in 2009. And so I went to this was 13 years ago. So I got online and I Googled it, and I found this article, and I'm going to show this to you, or not this article, but this website. This is congress.gov, and this website just houses all of the bills that are passing through Congress, and it gives the status of each bill. And so I found House Resolution 3326, Department of Defense Appropriations Act 2010. And then I went down to search and I looked for subsection 8113. And sure enough, 2/3 of the way down the bill, if in the printed version, it was on page 45, I found subsection 8113, which was titled Apology to Native Peoples of the United States. Now let me read this apology for you. Section 8113. A. Acknowledgement and apology. The United States, acting through Congress, 1. Recognizes the special legal and political relationship that Indian tribes have with the United States and the solemn covenant with the land we share. 2. Commends and honors Native peoples for the thousands of years that they have stewarded and protected this land. 3. Recognizes that there have been years of official depredations, ill-conceived policies, and the breaking of covenants by the federal government regarding Indian tribes. 4. Apologizes on behalf of the people of the United States to all Native peoples for the many instances of violence, maltreatment, and neglect inflicted on Native peoples by citizens of the United States. 5. Expresses its regret for the ramifications of former wrongs and its commitment to build on the positive relationships of the past and present to move towards a brighter future where all the people of this land live reconciled as brothers and sisters and harmoniously steward and protect this land together. 6. Urges the President to acknowledge the wrongs of the United States against Indian tribes in the history of the United States in order to bring healing to this land. And 7. Commends the state governments that have begun reconciliation with recognized Indian tribes located in their boundaries, and encourages all state governments similarly to work towards reconciling relationships with Indian tribes within their boundaries. B. Disclaimer. Nothing in this section, 1, authorizes or supports any claim against the United States, or 2, serves as a settlement of any claim against the United States. I read this and I was like, what the hell is that? Right? I'm a fairly well-read, knowledgeable man. Granted, I was living on the Navajo Nation. I was a bit out of the fast-paced life of most urban centers, but I still had the internet. I knew what was going on in the world. I had never heard of that apology before. And I was deeply troubled by the way it was written. Let me just go back to some of the language in this apology, right? We have number 4, subsection 4, apologizes on behalf of the people of the United States for the many instances of violence, maltreatment, and neglect inflicted on Native peoples by citizens of the United States, right? This apology was not a sincere apology to address the policies and official acts of the U.S. government against Native nations. Acts of genocide, acts of ethnic cleansing, acts of massacres, ordered by presidents, ordered by U.S. generals, taking place under policies written and stated and understood by the United States of America, right? This is the same thing we heard. That if you wonder why, when I listen to like Pope Francis's apologies for the Catholic Church, why I can pick out that language so quickly of how they're protecting themselves, they're doing risk management and not sincere apologies, is because this is how I first got exposed to this, where the U.S. government apologized not for its own actions, but apologized on behalf of its citizens. In other words, there was no legal way to hold the United States of America accountable. This act, this bill, this subsection 8113 was not apologizing on behalf of the United States. It was the United States apologizing on behalf of its citizens. And so I would imagine that language legally protected it. Expresses regrets. I also don't like the fact that commends and honors Native peoples, recognizes the special legal and political relationship Indian tribes have with the United States and the solemn covenant with the land we share. So they stole it, but now we share it, apparently, is the way it works. And then it asks if we can live reconciled as brothers and sisters and harmoniously steward and protect this land together. Again, you can see all of these troubling phrasings and wordings throughout this apology. And then just to make sure there's no misunderstanding, Section B is the disclaimer saying nothing supports any claim against the United States and nothing serves as a settlement of the United States. Now, this is an appropriations bill. So if we go up to subsection 8112, we see that we are granting, the Congress was granting $15 million to the priority National Guard counter-drug programs. If we go up here we see subsection 8110 was appropriating $24 million for the intelligence community management account for the program manager for information sharing environment. If we go up to 8109, we see during the fiscal year not to exceed $11 million, right? This is an appropriations bill. Every single one of these has a value, a dollar amount of what is going to be spent to make sure that this, whatever they're talking about, gets enacted. 8113 has no dollar amount in it. And then again, just to clarify, it basically says, and there's not going to be any dollar amounts with this. Nothing in this supports any claim against the United States or serves as any kind of a settlement against the United States. Again, this was one of the most pathetic apologies I had ever seen. Right? If your child did something wrong intentionally to somebody and gave this kind of apology to them, you would turn your child around and say, no, you go back and give a sincere apology. You go back and give a sincere apology and mean it. But this was what we had. And I was livid. I was beside myself. I'm like, not only how does this weak apology like this ever get passed, but then how does it never get mentioned? Again, I searched, looked online. There was very little written about this apology. I could find no public reading by the White House or by Congress. I found that it was Senator Sam Brownback from Kansas, who later went on to be governor, who sponsored this bill, not the bill, but sponsored this apology and was working to get it in there. And he did a reading of it off on the side with a few Native leaders at one point, but nothing by the whole Congress and nothing by President Obama. And I learned later that the signing of this bill was supposed to be an open signing, and then literally just a little bit before, maybe an hour or less than an hour before the bill was supposed to be signed publicly, they closed the doors, kicked all the press out, and it was signed behind closed doors. And then the press release that came out about this bill mentioned the Appropriations Act and the appropriations in the bill, but said nothing about this apology that was buried in it. And so what was fascinating was I was working at that point, as I showed earlier, on this virtual Native American state idea. Right, I was working on that. I had literally just announced. So 2 weeks earlier, I was going to be traveling with the candidates to talk about the creation of a virtual Native American state. And I'm like, I can't. How can I pursue that dialogue when we have this pathetic apology hanging out there with nobody acknowledging it? And so I decided I have to do whatever I can to get this apology publicized somehow. I called a friend of mine who works within Indian country, and I said to her that I was gonna publicize this apology, and I said I'll go to to Washington D.C. You know, I was living in the Navajo Nation in Arizona at the time. I said I'm going to go to D.C. and I'm going to read this apology in front of the Capitol building. I'm just going to. I said I'll live stream it or I'll do something. I'm going to read it, and I'm just going to make sure that somehow this gets publicized. And I said, Congress members can join me. They can do whatever they want, but we're going to get this thing publicized. And my friend wisely said to me, and I said, I was planning to go literally like in a few weeks. I was just going to go. I just had found out about it. And my friend very wisely said to me, he said, well, if you're going to invite people to join you, you should probably do it at a time when they might actually be able to get there. And so we thought about it. We kind of strategized. Obviously, we're going into 2012, which was an election year. And it was going to be hard to get anything noted and noticed during an election year. It was President Obama against Mitt Romney. And so we decided, well, what if we did it after the election, but before the inauguration? Right? One of the most typically, of course, 2020 was not typical, but up till then, typically the time between the election and the inauguration is a very kind of less. There's less agitation among the parties, and you're moving. You're waiting for the installation of a new government or a new administration, and so it's one of the better political moments to try and do something like this. So we decided, let's do it. And I said, well, why don't we, if we're going to wait until that period, let's just do it on the third anniversary of the signing of the bill. So we said, well, let's do it on December 19th of 2012. And so we began publicizing it. We began talking about it. I wrote an article. I'm going to share this. This article serves several purposes. This was one of the first articles I wrote that really highlighted some of the stuff I was learning about on the doctrine of discovery. I published it in 2012 in March 12, 2012. It was titled An Apology, an Appropriations Bill, and a Conversation That Never Happened. And I'm going to share this with you in the text there. And I want to just read. It's a fairly long article. I don't want to read the parts about the doctrine of discovery, but I want to read for you the beginning of this article and what I kind of said in this article. So let me actually, I'm going to switch back to my screen, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. But I want to just read this for you. So let me get it a little more onto one column. Okay. An apology and appropriations bill and a conversation that never happened. You are invited. I have reserved the space in front of the U.S. Capitol for December 19, 2012, and the entire country is divided. Every citizen, every immigrant, every leader, every member of Congress, every president, present, former, and aspiring is invited to join me for a public reading of the 2010 Department of Defense Appropriations Bill, H.R. 3326. My name is Mark Charles. I am not an elected official. I do not lead an organization, nor do I work solely for a specific group or company. I am merely the son of an American woman of Dutch heritage and a Navajo man who is living here on the Navajo reservation and trying to understand the complexities of our nation's history regarding race, culture, and faith so that I can form a path of healing and reconciliation. At that point, I was still using the word reconciliation for our people. And what do the Native American and the 2010 Department of Defense Appropriations Bill and reconciliation have to do with each other? And why am I inviting you to join me in reading this document publicly? I am doing so because of what is found on page 45 and 46. These pages contain subsection 8113 titled Apology to Native Peoples of the United States. I was shocked, confused, embarrassed, and ashamed when I learned 2 years after the fact that the U.S. government had issued an apology to its Native American citizens, but did very little to publicize it, and even seemed intent on burying it in a 67-page Defense Department Appropriations bill. The White House issued a press release regarding the signing of this bill, but it made no mention of the enclosed apology. As far as I can find, subsection 8113 was not read publicly until 6 months later, in May of 2010, when Senator Sam Brownback read it at a small ceremony with only a handful of Native American leaders present. Of the few articles I could find about this apology, many expressed the same sentiment as the one published by An Indian Country Today on December 3, 2011, which was titled "A Tree Fell in the Forest." The U.S. apologized to Native Americans and nobody heard a sound. So I won't read this whole article, but again, this was just some of what I was emotionally going through as I was learning about this apology. And I worked very hard from the beginning to say to people over and over and over again, I'm not leading anything. I'm not even an activist at that point. I'm just a Native man who learned about this apology and absolutely believes it needs to be publicized. And so I started publicizing it. I published many other articles over the year. I'm going to put a few more into the comment section here. This is one I published in May of 2012. It was about a speech I gave in front of James Anaya, who was the United Nations Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And during his United States tour, he was getting statements and hearing from Native communities, and he was down in Tucson, Arizona. I drove down there because I heard at the very last minute that he was going to be there and was hosting this listening session. And so I got there and I was able to give a speech to him. And in the speech, I told him about this appropriations bill and my work to publicize it. And I talked about the metaphor of the grandmother in the house, which I've used on this show frequently. And I felt really good about him. And I personally invited him. I invited him in that speech to join me in publicizing this event. I put up a video on my YouTube channel, and I shared this video. Again, this was around the metaphor of the grandmother in the house, and I titled it "A New Conversation." I issued a press release in September of 2012, and these are all on my blog, but I published this in a lot of different Native News websites as well. Native News Online, Indian Z. I sent some things to Indian Country Today. Anywhere that would be willing to publish my stuff, I would send them it and hope to try and get the word out. And then I even published this article. I published it twice. Once I published it in June, I think, and then I republished it again in December, if I remember correctly, just before the reading of the apology. Again, inviting people to come and join me for this reading. And then, we had to make reservations and reserve the space in front of the Capitol building. And we had to, get all this stuff out there. And I really wanted to live stream it, but this was 2012 and live streaming technology was barely, YouTube was a thing, but Zoom and stuff like that was, I don't remember that. It was nothing like it was today. And I did have some stuff on my YouTube channel back then. And I thought, well, if nothing else, I can record it and post it to YouTube. But I really wanted to do something live. And it was literally just after we reserved it, but just a few weeks before we were going to have the event, I found that there was a way to do a Google Hangout that you could then stream to YouTube. And Google had just added this functionality to their YouTube channel, like literally a few weeks earlier. And I learned that you could now do a Google Hangout and then stream it to your YouTube channel. And so I thought, great, I'm gonna stream it. And so I contacted the people I was working with at the National Parks Department about, can I live stream this? And they said, well, you can't, you can't broadcast. I said, no, we're just gonna live stream it through a Google Hangout. And again, nobody was using this technology at that point. And the guy said to me, he said, there's nothing in the regulations that says you can't do it. So I'm going to let you do it, even though there's nothing that says you can't. You can't do a broadcast, but I mean, like a full-on television broadcast. But there's nothing in here about live streaming. And so he allowed me to do it. He said, if you check back in 6 months, it'll probably be illegal. But right now, because it's a brand new technology, there's nothing that says you can't do it. And so we actually got permission to live stream it. And we didn't have the greatest technology, and we didn't have a lot of bandwidth, but we were able to do it. And so I did live stream it, and I'm putting that up it's on my YouTube channel, but I'm putting that there right now. There's the link for that live stream. Again, it's not good quality. We didn't have a good backup. The sound wasn't great. We didn't get a good recording of it, but it's there, and it's out on my YouTube channel. And then the next day on December. Oh, so actually that morning of the apology, again, I had sent out press releases. I had done everything I could. I had traveled around the country. I spoke everywhere I spoke. I brought this up. I wrote op-eds. I did press releases. I did everything to get people to write about this and to learn about it. And there was only one national media outlet that ever responded to me, and it was CNN. And they sent a reporter out to the Fort Defiance, and the reporter came out actually fairly early in the process, and sometime in this fall, I think, she came out and interviewed me in Fort Defiance and actually took some pictures. Her name, the reporter who saw me, was Moni Basu, and she came out and then she wrote an article and published it the day of the apology. So on December 19 in 2012, an article came out on CNN. But we had sent the press release to all, Washington Post and all these other, and no one else showed up that day. The only other group that was there, maybe outlet that was there, was Levi Rickert from Native News Online. Traveled from Grand Rapids on his own expense to come, and he joined us for the reading that apology, and he covered it for Native News Online. But no one else really publicized it. And I the next day on December 20, I posted this blog article to my website, where I just took a bunch of pictures, and I'll actually share that. I put that into the comment section right there, and so that's there as well. And I'll show you a few of these pictures on my. So yeah, we took a few pictures that day. And so here was me in front of the Capitol. This is Daniel Smiley, who came and sang some songs. Here's some people who came and joined us. Susie Silversmith, Terry Wildman was there. My son David played a flute song. There was a fantastic painting made by a good friend of mine named Steve Prince. And another great painting by another Native artist whose name was Elmer Yazzie, who came, and Elmer created this incredible image that's shown here. You can see that in the background. This is a painting made by Elmer Yazzie, there behind my son, of a buffalo regarding this apology. And yeah, again, so many people donated so much time and energy and effort to make it there. Richard Silversmith, a good friend of mine, was there, and right, Jim Northrup came. So one of my goals of this apology was, right, if you're going to apologize to Native peoples, you should probably do it in a language that we understand, not in English. Right? If your goal is to communicate to us how you feel about what you did, you should probably do it in our languages. And so I was able to get the apology translated into Navajo and into Ojibwe. And we actually had a white man, a good friend of mine named Ben Stoner, who read the apology um, in Navajo. He speaks our language fluently. And I thought that was very appropriate that a white man read the apology in Navajo publicly. And then Jim Northrup worked with me. And he translated the apology into Ojibwe. And then he read the apology in Ojibwe there. And we had wanted to do more languages, but we did not have the time and did not have the resources or even the volunteers to help us do that. But I felt very good that we had it translated into 2 native languages, and we read it there. And so all of those things. Hold on just a second. I hope I'm not. Oh. So we then publicized right the next day that that article regarding the all the pictures, and we put that up there. And my family had to get back. My wife and our children flew out with me and joined me for the apology, but they had to fly back for school and other stuff the next day. But I decided to stay in DC for 3 more days, and I planned this earlier because I said, who knows what kind of response this is going to get. I mean, again, I thought the problem was that nobody knew. That's what I thought the problem was, is nobody knew about this apology. And so I thought if we publicize it, I knew this article from CNN was going to come out. I had hoped other media outlets would come to the event. I had walked the halls of Congress, literally giving invitations out to senators and Congress members to come and join me. I had shared this publicly to religious leaders, to business leaders, to educators, to political leaders all across the country. And by and large, the only people that showed up the day of the event were people from the grassroots. I cannot even begin to tell you the varied and number of excuses that we heard, especially from friends and colleagues who were connected politically, who gave me some very, I'm just going to say, lame excuses of why they couldn't be there. And I was appalled, right? That very few people, primarily only people from the grassroots, anyone who worked with the Obama administration, didn't have the courage to show up. All of my friends who worked with the Obama administration, almost all of them, 99% of them, neglected to show up that day. I had sent emails. I sent a written letter to the White House asking President Obama to join me to read this apology. And I got a written letter back from the White House telling me that neither President Obama nor anyone from his staff or his administration was going to be there, including Joe Biden or any of his other staff members. No one from the White House was going to come and take ownership of this apology. I invited, as I said, Congress members, senators. I wanted someone who had a national position to come and join us to take ownership of this apology. And I waited throughout the entire event. Finally, and after an hour or so into it, I forget how long I waited. Finally, I had no other choice. I had to be the one to respond to it. No one else was there to take ownership at a national level for this apology. And we couldn't just leave it hanging. There were all these people from the grassroots, many who traveled there at their own expense. And we had to say something to acknowledge what was going on. And so I took the mic and I told our Native peoples that we should not accept this apology. Not out of spite, not out of anger, out of respect. Respect for ourselves and respect for our country. We deserve better. We deserve something better than this pathetic, buried apology that Sam Brownback and President Obama and the US Congress and Senate gave us. We deserve something better than that. And they can do better. And so I encourage Native peoples to not accept this apology. And again, then I was just astounded how blatantly the press ignored me. Didn't cover it. Native News Online was about the only agency that was there that day. And they were just barely beginning as a news agency. It was Levi Rickert by himself. And yeah, it was fascinating. I mean, there were other groups that wrote about it, right? On Native Times published this article about the apology. I'll put that out there. In 2017, I wrote something for Indian Z about this apology and put it out there. In 2020, a group that interviewed me for a documentary television show called Reconnecting Roots. I think it shows on PBS. They mentioned the apology in a video that they put out. And in 2021, the Washington Post, 12 years later, they actually, someone I knew who wrote for another religious news service, I forget her name, Emily, she wrote a story that got published in Washington Post, and they covered it. Or mentioned it. I shouldn't say covered it. They mentioned it. But that whole experience is both what introduced me, helped shaped me, and gave me some very realistic expectations about what not only our country, but our leaders are willing to do regarding Native history. Again, the number of excuses I heard from people of why they couldn't be there blew my mind. Pathetic, lame excuses. And it astounded me how, especially anyone who was connected politically, didn't want to touch this. It became apparent, even, there were a few offices in the Obama administration that actually dealt with social justice issues and with Native issues. And I sent letters and emails repeatedly to those offices asking for some sort of response from the administration. And after President Obama's second term, when he was now out of office and his administration was gone from the White House, I received an email from someone who worked in President Obama's White House apologizing to me for not responding to my emails and telling me that the White House was just this crazy political space that did not allow that kind of dialogue. They even offered to come and meet with me at some point to talk about it. And I emailed them back and I said, I'd love to talk about it. And I never heard from them again. Again, it almost got comical after a while. So anyway, so every year on December 19 of whatever year it is, I always have these mixed emotions in my soul. Because on one hand, it was the start of me learning how to create a voice or how to work in a public space. Right? I had never done anything like this before. And it gave me the experience. And then it opened my eyes to the number of people. Again, there were over 100 people there, almost entirely from the grassroots. And these were people who funded their own way to come to this event. Right? I comforted myself by saying, if there was over 100 people who probably showed up. They all funded them their own way to get there. And right, if I told myself, and I said this publicly several times, if I was doing a poetry reading and 100 people paid to fly themselves across the country to witness me doing a poetry reading, that would be incredibly flattering, right? It would be amazing. The problem is I wasn't doing a poetry reading. I was reading an apology by the United States Congress for the very first time publicly apologizing for its history to Native peoples. Right? This was more historic because, again, a few weeks later, literally a few weeks later, in January of 2020, I came back to DC and I was at the second inauguration of President Obama. And I was standing literally a few hundred yards from where we read the apology a few weeks earlier. And now this space was just overflowing with people from around the globe who were here to witness this. And I'm like, a month ago, we couldn't get 100 people to come and join us for the reading of this apology, which in my mind was more historic than President Obama's second inauguration and almost as historic as his first. And we couldn't get 100 people there. And it very much helped me understand at some very deep levels how much of an uphill battle it was going to be. The thing I had to finally accept was it's not that people didn't know. That's not the problem. It's not that they didn't know. It's that they didn't care. And they weren't willing to risk their political relationships or their positions or their status or their policies or their whatever it is they were fighting for to try to bring about justice for Native nations and Native peoples. It literally demonstrated to me the cowardice of so many of our nation's leaders. The absolute cowardice of our nation's leaders, not willing to take ownership of this because of what it might cost them politically. And so it helped me understand the absolute uphill battle that we had moving forward. So anyway, this is why December 19 will always be an important day in my own life. And at some point, I hope it will be an important day in the life of our nation. I continue to work to try and publicize this apology. I talk about it fairly frequently when I speak. I'm still adamant the United States can give a better apology and that Native people should not accept this apology that was buried in this appropriations bill. But it's what we have, right? It's what we have. And so at the very least, we can use it as a demonstration of what not to do. I would love to have a conversation with President Obama, about this. I would love to sit down and talk with him about this, to find out what he was thinking. I know he knew about this, right? He had to have known about this. I'm actually quite certain he knows about me. I right, even from the email I got from his staff at his White House, I know at least his advisors knew about me and what I was doing, and just were like, no, that's way too toxic to get President Obama involved in, and Joe Biden as well. He was part of the administration. He could have come just as well. He likes to claim he's a big advocate for Native peoples. Should have come, Joe. Would have been fun. You could have owned this. But anyway, this is one of the things that deeply shaped me. And you can tell I still have some emotion about it. So, not today, colonizer. I'm still working to publicize this. I'm still working to, if nothing else, shame my nation into doing what's right. Hopefully to compel them to do what's right through challenging them to act with integrity. But if nothing else, we can use this to shame them for how not to act. Anyway, I just wanted to share some of that story with you. And I wanted to give you a little bit of taste of what happened and what we did. And again, throughout that process, there were so many people who stepped up to the plate. People from the grassroots who helped organize it, who helped plan it, who helped fund it, who helped make this thing happen. And I am deeply, deeply, deeply grateful. I met some of my closest friends during that time. People who helped make this event happen. And I will never forget that. But I was also deeply, deeply disappointed by the absolute cowardice that I saw from our nation's political, business, religious, and educational leaders who just decided it was far too risky to go and be involved in publicizing something like this because of what it would probably cost them politically. So anyway, that's a part of the journey. So December 19, 2022, 13th anniversary of the buried apology to Native peoples that was put on page 45, subsection 8113 of House Resolution 3326, the 2010 Department of Defense Appropriations Act. I hope all these resources I put out there are helpful for you, and I hope that you enjoy looking at some of those things. There's a whole story that kind of got rolled out from that. But yeah, I don't regret doing it. I'm very glad I had a chance to do this. It actually helped shape me for what I'm doing today and the work I'm trying to do now. But it just demonstrates how difficult this work is and how challenging it is to raise these topics that our country doesn't want to talk about. I am going to share one last link with you. I know we're coming up on Christmas. Hanukkah started just a day or two ago. And on my website, wirelesshogan.com, I'm running a special for anyone interested in buying a copy of Unsettling Truths, the book that I co-authored with Singchan Ra, which is if you order a copy today, anytime in December, actually, you have the option to mark it as a gift and have it gift wrapped. And we'll gift wrap it and send it out with a card to anyone you want to send the book to. So, I also want to share a few pictures with you. I just got back from New Mexico, and I wanted to share a few pictures with you from when I was out there. So, first of all, this is just out of a little humor here, right? I was in New Mexico. I'm living in DC, 2,000 miles away. I had to get some bluebird flower, right? And so I had an extra suitcase with me, so I packed it with bluebird flower. I even have one bag back here. It's going to be a gift for somebody, but I'm keep storing it there for the moment. So I have my bluebird flower and not only a supply for my family, but a few gifts I'm going to give out to some people here in DC. So that was a lot of fun. When I was back there as well, I had the chance to meet with a group um, where it was a group at the church my parents go to, Bethany Christian Reformed Church. And I'm running, it's a book study special where if you buy 10 copies of Unsettling Truths for the purpose of starting a book study, I will have my assistant get in contact with you, and we will schedule with you a 45-minute virtual Q&A where your study can ask me questions about the book, and it can be a way to either wrap up or be in the middle or at the beginning of your study, just a way to kind of entice people to join the study by having a Q&A with the author or the co-author of the book. And so Bethany had been doing this study, and they had called to schedule an appointment with me, and we were going to do it a few weeks ago. And I saw that it was just a week or so from my trip to New Mexico. And so I told them, I said, hey, I'm going to be in New Mexico. If you'd like to do it in person, I'd be thrilled to do it while I'm there. And so we were able to schedule it in person, and about 20 people showed up for the study, and we had a fantastic conversation. I love these types of dialogues. These are the conversations I live for. They've read the book, they've wrestled through it, and this allows us to take the conversation so much deeper. And so I had a great chance. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I love all these book study Q&As. I've done several of them in the past few weeks and months, and I really enjoy the conversations that we have with them. Of course, being back there was a great time to be with my parents, my mother and my father. And this was one night when my dad made some stew, and my mom and I made some fry bread, and we had some mutton stew and fry bread for dinner that night. And then if you watch, you'll see I was back there. I watched the sunrise pretty much every morning, not too far from my parents' house. And it was cold. I don't think it got above freezing the entire week I was home. It snowed over the weekend, and it was freezing or below the entire week. But there's a small hill near my parents' house where I would go up, and I would watch the sunrise from there. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I was up there 3 mornings that week, and I loved it. I loved watching the sunrise from there. So it's great, a chance to be back home with family and to see some friends again. I spent a day on the reservation with some friends out there, and yeah, it was a great trip home. Anyway, I wanted to share all that with you. I wanted to get back online and share a second cup of coffee with you. And I hope everyone has a very good rest of the day. I'm going to look through the chat to see if any questions were asked or anything in here. If you have a question, feel free to put it in there. I'm happy to try and get it out there. But let me just look through and see if there's any questions being asked. Someone is mad at me because I'm streaming on Twitch. I'm sorry, but you don't have to watch, sir. Diane Friedman, Dan Barnes, thank you for doing this research and educating us. You're very welcome. I'm very glad that you are able to learn with me and learn about these things as well. So thank you very much. Yeah, well, no, I don't see any real questions on here. Someone asked, are you interested in an online interview with independent media? I'm loosely affiliated with KRDT. I am open to anything. So I will actually put a link into there on my website. It's a contact me page. And from there, let me find this page first. But if you go to my website and go to, I think it's the About Me page, I believe, speaking requests. Yeah, if you go there, I'm going to put the link in here. But you can request an interview with me from my website. So I will put that in the chat right now. And if you submit that, someone from my staff will be in touch with you about potentially setting up an interview. So thank you for asking that question. Anyway, I hope everyone has a great day. Walk and beating my relatives. And may we all learn how to walk and beat it together. Hakone.